I scared her away, like many of the other women that I've had crushes on.
Oh,
But not you, my love.
you didn't scare me away. You're just the right amount of intense for me.
Yes, with your Scorpio Venus. Yes.
Mm-hmm. We'll work on the humor part.
Okay, thank you.
We'll work it out.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit, a podcast exploring the intersection of Western astrology and Jungian psychology. Astrology is a language that communicates how the planets and stars influence life on Earth, while psychology helps us navigate both conscious and unconscious experiences. Together, these tools offer the potential for self-understanding, growth, and transformation. Join astrologer Scott Tajarian and me, psychotherapist Gabriella Durso, as we dive into the cosmic forecast each week.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. This is the week of April 22nd to the 28th. Hi, Gabriella.
Hey, Scott.
This week, we begin with the full moon in Scorpio, the fixed water sign symbolized by the scorpion, which is occurring on Tuesday, April 23rd at 4:48 p.m. Pacific time. So this is sort of the midpoint culmination of the lunar cycle that began on April 8th during the solar eclipse in Aries. So this is the midpoint. We're halfway through that cycle. And it's interesting that it's in Scorpio because when you go back to the new moon solar eclipse, what was that about? That was about setting your intentions to love yourself, to be confident, courageous, authentic in who you are, to be assertive, to advocate for yourself, maybe even be aggressive if need be, so that you are respected and have healthy boundaries. That this is who I am, and that's who you are. We're separate. Now the full moon is in Scorpio, which is the other sign that is ruled by Mars. Aries is ruled by Mars, the god of war, the planet of action, aggression, and conflict, where the new moon solar eclipse was, conjunct with Chiron, the wound and the ancient wisdom that is unlocked through healing that wound. That was a real challenging look at our insecurities, our fears, needing to face our fears. Scorpio is also ruled by Mars and Pluto, the god of death, lord of the underworld, the planet of transformation. But where one sign, Aries, is about boundaries, this other sign, Scorpio, is about merging with others, being intimate with others, whether it be a verbal intimacy like a secret, a physical intimacy like sex, or a financial intimacy like sharing money. But the full moon is a release. The new moon is the inhale. The full moon is the exhale. So when you go back to April 8th, the solar eclipse, new moon in Aries, that's establishing who we are. We want to answer the question, who am I? Now that I know who I am, I need to ask myself, is this the person that I want to be bonded to? Is this the individual that I want to be intimate with? Is this somebody that I can truly be vulnerable with and respected?
So you're saying that this part in the cycle is a time to check whether or not who you're merged with still feels good to you, essentially.
Yes. I feel like it's clearing space or transforming relationships that you still would like to have, but in order for them to continue, there needs to be a shift. There needs to be a change. Because this is who I am now. If you want to continue being in relationship with me, then you need to accept who I am, and you may need to change who you are in order to be connected with me in the intimate, vulnerable way that we're connected. And you may be saying the same thing to me. That, well, I hear what you're saying, but I'm seeing myself in a different perspective. And I'm trying to figure out how the two of us really fit together in this new dynamic. I'm not sure that we can. So there needs to be a release of some part of the energetic exchange, whether it's the energetic exchange in totality or just a facet of it, so that we can fit with those that we're bonded to or move on from the ones that we're bonded to.
Well, I think it's interesting to consider if one person is changing in the relationship, sort of by default, the other person has to as well.
Totally. Exactly.
So you can't really have one person merging without the other one needing to participate in that. Versus that, I guess the way that Mars is working through Aries is much more individual, where you're really just focused on your part, who you are authentically, just as a single unit, versus the Mars in Scorpio is taking into consideration the other person.
Right. Exactly.
In a different way.
Yes. Yes.
You have two elements that are interacting with one another, that they're both changed. That it's really an illusion that we can sort of change independently in the first place.
And so this full moon is accepting the changes that need to happen within the bonds due to the rediscovery of self with all that Aries energy during the solar eclipse.
Well, so like here's a simple example. Like if you do more grocery shopping, then I do less grocery shopping. So there's really no way like for you to change without me changing.
Yes. Yes. I also think about the fact that, during the full moon, the sun is fully reflecting its light on the moon. So where's the sun during the full moon in Scorpio? It's in Taurus. And Taurus is the fixed earth sign symbolized by the bull and ruled by Venus. This is the sign that represents self-worth, values. So that's sort of the next step from the Aries energy is Taurus. Aries is who am I? Taurus is what do I need? And then the opposition to the moon says, what do I need from the people that I'm sharing my emotions with, that I'm sharing intimacy with, that I'm being vulnerable with? Are they meeting my needs? Am I meeting their needs? If yes, great, then maybe we bond deeper during this cycle. If no, then something needs to change. Because I may be going to the grocery store more and you may be going less, but I may not be okay with that scenario.
Right.
I may feel like, you know what, I'm going to the grocery store too much. And one thing that I decided during the new moon solar eclipse was that I want more balance in terms of who goes to the grocery store. And so in order for this relationship to continue, you're going to need to go to the grocery store as much as I do. Does that mean you're going to break up with me?
That's it. I'm out of here.
Yes. So, big release, full moon, very exciting. The deepest, darkest, most passionate sign. What are you feeling in your intimate bonds? What is the energy that you are exchanging with those that you're bonded to? How does it feel? Do you feel lifted by the ones that you're bonded to, or do you feel drained? If you feel drained, then something needs to transform. Does your partner, your lover, your friend, your business partner, do they feel drained? Or do they feel lifted by you? These are some of the questions to ask yourself during the full moon in Scorpio. But think back to the new moon solar eclipse on April 8th. What was going on in your life during that period? What were the intentions that you set? Are those intentions being adhered to with yourself? Are you honoring and respecting your boundaries? Are you respecting yourself? And are the ones that you're bonded to, that you're intimate with, are they adhering to the intentions that you set for yourself? Are you adhering to their intentions? Do you even know what their intentions were? Did they even set intentions? But this is an opportunity for you to say, let's get clarity in terms of our relationship. What secrets do you have that you could share with me? Are there any secrets that I have that I need to share with you? Because Scorpio is the sign of secrets. So what are we hiding from? What are we hiding from emotionally?
I think sometimes we've spent time on this podcast talking about nonviolent communication, learning how to identify your feelings and identify the need behind the feeling. But ultimately, I think we've spent less time considering that one of the reasons why someone might have a hard time identifying feelings and needs and then actually making those requests is because they might fear that the other person won't be willing to meet their needs.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I think we're framing it in a way where we're hopeful that through this merging process that both parties can get their needs met. But part of what I guess I'm wanting to highlight is that it could go the other way, and that is part of the risk.
And the other way is what? That they would hide from you?
The other way is that you would clearly say, I'm going to the grocery store too much. I don't want to be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, too bad. I want you to keep going to the grocery store. Because this has been our agreement for 10, 20, 30 years of marriage. What do you do then?
Well, it all depends on how firm you are to what it is you want. Contracts can always be rewritten, broken, changed. So there may be conflict. I mean, this is the sign that is ruled by the gods of war and death.
Yeah,
so
there could be some long-standing conflicts that
yes,
that it sounds like from what you're describing are ready to be brought to the surface, or there's an invitation to bring them to the surface.
Yep.
So I think I'm just feeling kind of the weight and the power of that. You know, we're sort of making light of it with this grocery store example, but just to say that this could run deep.
Oh yeah.
Whatever it is that's coming up. And maybe one way, you know, if you find yourself listening to this and thinking, wow, I have no idea how to broach this subject with my partner, something, you know, that you've been keeping a secret about how you really feel, that maybe there are ways, let me know what you think about this, but if there are ways to kind of start working through conflict in sort of bite-sized pieces, maybe maybe through conversations about chores or, daily responsibilities in the home as an entry point to some of the bigger shifts.
Yes, I'm thinking of ways to articulate needs that are coherent with the Scorpio energy. Scorpio can be very paranoid and manipulative. If you're feeling paranoid about broaching a certain subject and how it's going to go, that's where the manipulation can come in, and you're trying to find a way that is more underhanded to get what you want. Which is not something I'm suggesting, of course, but it's just something to look out for.
Warning against that tendency.
Yes. There's also a way to do it which can annoy a lot of people, but if you're talking to the right person, then it does have a flow to it. It just all depends. And before I even say what that is, I should also mention, like, if you're born with key astrological points or planets between, let's say, 1 and 6 degrees, 7 degrees, 1 and 7 degrees in Leo or Aquarius, this full moon could be very uncomfortable for you. But the sort of lighter side that Scorpio articulates needs that the Leo and Aquarius energy don't like is sarcasm.
Can you say a little more about sarcasm as a Scorpio? I know you have some insight there for us.
Yeah. Well, sarcasm is like, I make jokes all the time and people don't get them.
And do you enjoy that when people don't get
Some
the jokes?
people do get it. I don't enjoy it when they don't get it. Of course, I want people to get it. But people think I'm serious when I'm not. And like, I have a friend who's a Scorpio Moon, and he's also a Leo, and his wife's a Leo. And he really leans into the sarcasm because he's a Scorpio Moon, and it's his emotions. So when his emotions start to get tugged on, he'll make a sarcastic remark that will then just send his wife into the stratosphere of anger because she's not finding the humor in it. So that's the challenge. If you're communicating with someone who does enjoy that sarcastic sense of humor, then it can work as a way to sort of broach a subject that is touchy. They'll maybe pick up on, okay, is there something going on here? Like, you're using sarcasm, but are you serious? And it's like, well, actually, but this is something that it kind of annoys me. It rubs me the wrong way, but I didn't know how to bring it up without being sarcastic. The sarcasm for some people, I think, is why people don't like Scorpio. I think it is part of the sting.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, it's part of the sting.
So the sarcasm, it does feel like a sting to the person. Speaking as a person who, I don't think I'm very sarcastic.
No.
Even though I have Venus in Scorpio, I don't particularly enjoy sarcasm.
I know. It's so weird.
I think I experience it as a sting, and I also feel like it can have a defensiveness about it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's what you just spoke to. Like, when there's something that you're feeling vulnerable about, and maybe you don't know how to approach it, that might be when you lead with sarcasm. And I think we do that a lot with humor. You know, when we make, you know, comedians are famous for this. They're making jokes about, you know, pretty serious topics and trying to kind of speak their truth in a way that might be more palatable to someone. So I think that behind the sarcasm is actually an intention to connect, but it can sometimes have the opposite effect.
Yes, it can repel people.
Right. Because thinking about, you know, when you make a joke that's sarcastic or say something sarcastic, I think what you're really inviting me into is like a secret in some way. Like you're wanting me to merge with you around something that you're enjoying.
Yes.
But it can have really the opposite effect.
Yes.
Which is probably pretty frustrating for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So what is the healthy way to express yourself with this Scorpion energy? I really don't know if there is a comfortable way, you know, because the only other way that I can think of is just that passionate response, like just so intense, where it's like, you know, like you've been stung and your arm is just going, like if you got stung on the arm, it's like won't, because all the blood is rushing there. Like there's something is coming up, something is boiling up here. And I think that's kind of the point, that, you know, people that I know, speaking with the full moon in Scorpio, people that I know that are Scorpio moon are very hidden with their emotions, but they feel so deeply, like deeper than they even want to know how deep they feel, because it's like they know how deep it is and they don't want to know because it's so intense. And so I'm not sure if this full moon is going to drive us to that place where it's like we all clam up and are kind of brooding and hiding and pressing it down. Like, this is not, I don't want to know about it. Or because of the full moon energy, it boils up. And we have to just deal with whatever comes up, whatever passionate response we're having. Because we're so tied in and intertwined with whoever it is we're intertwined with, whoever we're sharing secrets with, whoever we're sharing our bodies with, whoever we're sharing our money with.
Maybe that sarcastic reply is an attempt to sort of control the depth of the feeling.
Keep some space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because you have that moment with sarcasm. I know we sort of moved on from it, but it's like there's still something here.
Yeah.
Like when you're stung, as the person who's been stung, there's, I imagine, like a freeze response that happens, or there's a moment of sort of shock.
Yeah.
Where you're trying to figure out what happened. And sometimes I experience that with sarcasm where I'm like, what? Is that it? First of all, is that my inner dialogue is like, is that a joke? Okay, if it is a joke, do I think it's funny? What is he really trying to say? What's going on here? You know, there's like that, there's that same cause for like pause and maybe confusion in that moment.
Yes. Yeah. Is that the point?
I think that's the point.
Because I'm just thinking about the confusion, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of confusion around this full moon, because sort of segueing into the next transit, Mercury goes direct on Thursday, April 25th. So as the full moon is happening, Mercury is going to be grinding to a halt. Retrograde. And then returns to direct motion 2 days later on April 25th. So communication is going to be in that deep place of stagnation where it's like, what are you trying to say to me? Is that what you said? Am I hearing you correctly? I'm not sure.
And is that both parties confused, the speaker and the listener? Would
Probably.
You say? Okay.
Did I say something? That's me being confused as the speaker.
Yeah.
Okay. You're supposed to laugh there, my love.
We need one of those, like when you hold up for the audience when they're supposed to laugh or clap.
Laugh, applause.
I need some help.
Or we need a drum roll, like a like when
do.
I say something funny. Yeah, exactly. So this is happening in the cardinal fire sign, symbolized by the ram and also ruled by Mars. Aries. That's where Mercury retrograde has been since it began on April 1st. Now April 25th it ends. And where it is on April 25th is the exact same place that it was on March 18th when it transited into its retrograde shadow. Conjunct with the North Node, the soul's purpose, the karmic pathway of the soul, in Aries as well. So the North Node has been at 15 degrees in Aries since early March. Here we are, April 25th. Where's the North Node? 15 degrees in Aries. So when Mercury moved into its retrograde shadow at 15 degrees in Aries, it was conjunct the North Node. When Mercury retrograde ends, now, April 25th, it's conjunct with the North Node in Aries. So this happening with the full moon in Scorpio, it is maybe putting us into those confusing, uncomfortable situations where we just have to say what's on our mind. We have no control over it. It's like, yeah, that's what I said. I'm being authentic. I don't know how else to say it. Is it upsetting to you? Great. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I don't know. Should I be sorry? Are you sorry? It's like, it feels like there's going to be a lot of fire being spewed right now because people are finding their way in the world in terms of, where do I fit in? Where do I fit in my relationships, most importantly, but also in the broader scheme of society? How do I fit in? What is my role? Who am I? But who am I in these bonds?
So we might kind of speak some accidental truths here.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me of this phrase that I'm sure you've heard, a Freudian slip.
Yes.
When you say something that you didn't really mean to say, but it actually is what you meant to say.
That's it. Yes.
Those are some of my favorite moments. It's
yes.
like, it's almost like you bypass yourself. Like you go to say something that, isn't completely accurate. Like you defending yourself somehow, but it comes out anyway.
Yes.
And kind of surprises both people.
Yes. Well, I had a Freudian slip that I still remember. This happened 20 plus years ago, probably. Had to have been, like at least like 22, 23 years ago.
What happened?
Yeah. I had a crush on a young girl, a young gal, a woman.
You've had so many crushes, baby.
Yes, I have. It's insane. So this was a young woman in acting class. Her name was Parker. And I told like my roommates about this girl Parker, I'm so in love with her. Like she's amazing, this and that. And myself and my 3 roommates were sitting watching like MTV. And it was the famous VJ Carson Daly, And
I remember Carson Daly.
yeah, and people, I was always like, why do girls have a crush on this guy, Carson Daly? And so I was like, I wanted to say, oh, Carson, but instead I said, oh, Parker. And people were like, Parker, Parker. You know, they started screaming Parker because they said like, you said Parker. And I was like, I didn't say that. I was so embarrassed. It was very awkward for me. But that's a Freudian slip, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like swooning at this young woman, but I was like mockingly swooning as a young woman to Carson Daly, but I was really myself swooning at this girl I had a crush on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you felt exposed.
Totally.
Which is
the Scorpio energy. Yes, I was like a scorpion in the middle of a crowded party. I just felt like I was getting stepped on left and right by my roommates because they brought that up all the time. They were just like, Parker! They'd always say that, and just like everyone would start laughing. They'd tell the story to everyone in front of me, and I was just so embarrassed. Oh my God. So that's why it stuck with me all these years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So there might be a lot of Freudian slips during this full moon in Scorpio, Mercury retrograde, where people are saying things that they don't mean to say, but it is authentic to what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I didn't want to say that, but it is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. But also,
good.
It probably feels good.
Yeah.
On some level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. So, yeah, Parker. I scared her away like many of the other women that I've had crushes on.
Oh.
But not you, my love.
You didn't scare me away. You're just the right amount of intense for me.
Yes, with your Scorpio Venus. Yes.
Mm-hmm. We'll work on the humor part.
Okay, thank you.
We'll work it out.
So Mercury is in its retrograde shadow still until May 13th. So on May 13th, Mercury will be where it was on April 1st. So think back to where things were for you on March 18th. That's where Mercury is now. And that conjunction with the North Node. Are you speaking authentically? Are you speaking assertively? Are you advocating for yourself through the conversations that you're having with others? That's what this North Node Mercury conjunction wants. The 3 A's of Aries: assertiveness, advocate, and authenticity. That's how you want your communication to be right now. So where were you on March 18th? Where were you on April 1st? Where are you now? Have you made progress in speaking up, speaking out for yourself so that people are clear about who you are? And where do you want to be by May 13th when Mercury moves out of its retrograde shadow? By then, hopefully, you've developed the mental boundaries that you need to truly have the courage to listen to others. Because the threat of listening to others is, they're going to change my mind. You're trying to change my mind. No, it's just a different opinion.
Well, I think too, it's hard to listen to others if you are not practicing self-expression yourself.
Say more about that.
Well, it can just feel like emotional labor if you're not getting a turn expressing yourself. I think so much of this Aries energy is just about a willingness to share what you're already experiencing as an inner conflict. I think it's really a misunderstanding that, we're creating conflict when we're communicating and sharing conflicts in relationships. But what we're doing is just communicating the conflict that already lives within us.
Yeah.
You know, it's really a misconception. We think to ourselves, especially, you know, this is very much a Libra trait, is I will swallow my own discomfort for external harmony. And it's true, you do have external harmony when you hold the conflict to yourself, but it doesn't mean the conflict goes away. The conflict just lives inside of you.
Well, do you think there's more conflict going on for somebody who, or for, let's just say, us, with this Mercury and Aries energy that we've been experiencing for an extended period of time because of the retrograde? Are we at war in our own minds? Or maybe it's a different type of conflict. It's like the Libra energy is the inner conflict of which side should I choose? I don't know. But the Aries conflict is, you know, it's like, screw those people. I don't, you know, they're wrong. I'm right. And you're arguing with somebody, not yourself. You're arguing with someone outside of yourself, but in your own mind.
Well, I think there's no perfect answer for every circumstance, but I think what you're highlighting is that both of those are extremes. That the Libra energy is about internalizing and holding conflict for the sake of external harmony, and the Aries energy is the inverse. Let me get all this conflict out in the open because I can't hold any of it internally.
Right.
And so I think when we're looking at extremes, either extreme is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
We need to have the ability to emotionally regulate and have the discernment for when we're going to hold the conflict or when we need to share it. I have my good friend, Stacy, who's going to enjoy this shout out very much. We used to have an expression, which we still use, is this the hill to die on? And it's like one of our favorite kind of inside jokes now.
Yeah.
Not so much of an inside joke because it's on the podcast, but, you know, not everything can be the hill to die on, you know, which would be that Aries energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of like
Right.
everything requires a battle cry and running down the street with a torch, you know? No. So either extreme, I think, is problematic. But we go through these planetary cycles because we need a chance to orient towards the extremes, like to find the balance. Like sometimes I think about, you know, if you're holding a pendulum, how what allows the pendulum to stop in the center is by allowing it to go to the extremes before it can settle in the middle.
Right. Well, it feels like there's a lot of extremes happening with this Mercury and Aries retrograde. And so
I would say pick your battles.
Pick your battles. Embrace the intensity. Don't run from the fight, but don't try to engage in every fight.
Exactly.
What's worth fighting for? What is this an argument worth having?
Yes.
What's my objective? But also, what's happening with you instinctually? In your mind, in wanting to have a conversation. Like when you feel that impulse, I can't let this person get away with just saying that. And okay, then let's engage. Let's engage. I've got a different point of view.
So you're saying be aware of the impulse, even if then you decide not to engage.
Yes. But I would say that if you feel the impulse, maybe run with it. Or not. I don't know. But that's for each individual to decide. I really feel like this Mercury in Aries extended period is here to help us learn to articulate and advocate for ourselves.
Whatever that means.
Exactly.
For
so
you.
are you achieving that objective during this period?
Mm-hmm. That's such an interesting example about how a transit that's happening collectively could still mean different things for the individual.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Well, and I'm just thinking how being assertive for one person could look really different than being assertive for another person in terms of what that looks like, what progress would be for each person.
Well, in saying that, it just makes me think of like who are the people out there right now that were born with key astrological points or planets at or around 15 degrees in Cancer or Capricorn, because they're being stimulated to be impulsive in a way that is antithetic to how they're designed to be, where Cancer is meant to be subtle and Capricorn is meant to have a plan, where Aries, there is no plan. The plan is I dominate. Like, I punch you in the face and I worry about the consequences later. So people that were born with key astrological points or planets at around 15 degrees in Cancer or Capricorn are being brought into this place of discomfort and maybe needing to speak up but not knowing how, because it's different than what they're used to. It's different than how they're used to articulating themselves.
Well, and some of this, I think, can be really difficult for adults because part of what we're accessing here, I think, is our child selves.
Yeah.
So if we look at, this was Freud's theory, drive theory, that we are driven by our impulses. So he called that part of ourselves the id, and he distinguished that part from, he said we have the id, the ego, and then the superego. So the id, in really what you're describing, is this Aries energy of like, I gotta move this. Like, what's coming up for me has to come out.
Yes.
On the opposite of the id would be the superego, which the superego is, well, what are people going to say? What would they think? What is the right thing to do according to societal standards? And then you have the ego in the center. The ego is the one, weighing the options or sort of deciding how much of the id versus the superego is going to inform our life choices. Kind of the negotiator.
Right.
How much of the id am I going to let out versus how much do I need to adhere to? The superego represents authority figures. So it could be like parents, teachers, politicians, the government, any sort of expectations that, we've sort of agreed upon about what a civil society looks like. But his point was that we're always feeling that drive of the id. And it's interesting, in his chart, I think he had Mars connecting to a couple planets that would really indicate that that was his story.
Yes, right.
Very much so.
He's motivated by those impulses. He had a strong impulse.
He did.
Right? Okay.
He did. And Freud was also the one who thought that the id also held your sexual impulses as well.
That's the Mars energy.
And that's the Mars energy.
Yes.
So I think what's so fascinating, anytime you look at someone, a pivotal figure in sort of psychology or any sort of field of study, you really do have to consider their chart and who they were, because they're understanding their own theories through the lens of their chart.
Exactly.
So that was incredibly true for Freud. Is that like a universal truth? maybe it resonates with some more than others,
Sure.
but it really was for him.
Right, exactly.
And it's an interesting way to think about sort of, okay, we have these two extremes, like we talked about with the pendulum.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this kind of midpoint, which in this example would be represented by the ego, that's kind of attempting to sort of tether us or ground us in some way. And, these transits are supporting us in getting to really feel into each of these parts.
Yes. Our individuality.
Mm-hmm.
What makes us unique.
Yes.
What makes us us.
Right.
Me. Yes. So I think some questions to ask yourself during this transit is, who am I? Am I speaking in a way that is authentic to me? Am I advocating for myself? Am I being assertive in sharing my thoughts?
And I wonder too if another question is, what can I learn from my impulses?
What can I learn from my impulses? That's a great one. Yeah.
Because especially if we acknowledge that these impulses are coming from the id, from our innermost selves, from the child self,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on there? Like, what is it? Is it connected to a need that wasn't met?
Right.
When children are having a meltdown or a temper tantrum, there's a need that's not met.
Exactly.
Whether or not the adult in that situation really understands what it is or really agrees with the need, it's happening for a reason.
So say that question again.
What can I learn from my impulses?
What can I learn from my impulses? That's a good one. Yeah. What can I learn from my impulses?
This is an example from my own life. I had a really interesting experience in grad school where I would say my id in that example I was experiencing some rebellion, wanting to kind of act out or not turn assignments in on time. I realized I was connecting with an inner adolescent because the last time I was really in school, I was in college, but the impulse felt older than like my undergrad self. It really felt like a teenage Gabriella. And it ended up being an interesting realization to work with. When you study psychology, you're often looking back at like family dynamics and you're writing papers about, how the material relates to your own life. So I had a whole inner process, where I needed to go back and talk to my parents about things that happened in high school, or, it really brought me, in this example, recognizing that my impulses needed me to look back at this time in my life.
Where did they stem from? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
What can I learn from this impulse? Because it's really just information. It doesn't mean that I acted on all of my impulses, although I did on a few of them, which is a story for another day. But yeah, it ended up bringing me a lot of healing. And I wouldn't say it's perfectly resolved, but I would say a combination of that, and then also a particular internship I did where I got to work with teenagers, was really confronting in some way for me.
Yes. Because you were seeing yourself in some way.
I was seeing that part of myself.
Right. Well, continuing with the theme of impulse, because we've been talking about Mars as the planetary ruler of Scorpio, where the full moon is, and then Mars as the planetary ruler of Aries, where Mercury retrograde is ending, conjunct with the North Node. This next transit includes Mars, the god of war, the planet of action, aggression, and conflict, which is completing its transit through Pisces. Next week it moves into the sign that it rules, Aries, but before it does, it forms a conjunction with Neptune, the god of fresh water and the sea, the planet of illusion, deception, compassion, and intuition. At 28 degrees in the mutable water sign symbolized by the fish and ruled by Neptune, as well as Jupiter, Pisces. This is a transit that is occurring from Friday to next Tuesday, from April 26th to the 30th, with an exact conjunction happening on Sunday, April 28th. So thinking about those impulses and where they stem from, this is sort of, in a sense, maybe the creme de la creme of that type of transit, because Mars is not only transiting through Pisces, which is the sign that represents the unconscious, but it's also conjunct with Neptune, the planetary ruler of Pisces, which represents dreams, fantasy. So what is coming up for you during this period, the end of the week, Friday to next Tuesday? Is there some sort of unconscious part of yourself that has been revealed throughout the week because of these impulses that you've been experiencing? And it's like, what is this?
The Freudian slips.
Yes, exactly.
What slipped out?
Yes. It's sprouting from the unconscious.
Yeah.
Yes. So do you have the courage to really look within yourself? Do you have the courage to pay attention to what is coming up beneath the surface? If you have a nightmare or you have an intense dream, sit with it. Have the courage to sit with it, analyze it, think about it for a minute. Reflect it upon your reality.
I'm glad you brought in dreams, because that's a really interesting place to experience the id.
Yes, tell me about that.
Well, you don't have access to your defenses in your dreams.
Yeah, you're not controlling them.
You're not controlling them.
Right.
So you're not able to control what's showing up.
Yes. And so whatever comes up is the impulse. Right? Is that what you're saying?
It's showing you some part of the impulse. So if we consider that one way to look at dreams is that every person in the dream represents a part of you, then there might be one character or one person in the dream who's representing the impulse. You might not identify with the impulse in the dream. Like, you might experience the impulse as a figure that's outside of you, which gives you information about how you relate to your impulses. That would indicate maybe that you're not conscious of your impulses. You feel a separation from them. So they show up in your dreams as a monster or as another figure in the dream.
So sticking with, sort of the theme of Scorpio and Mars being that planet that represents attraction and sex, transiting through Pisces, the sign of the unconscious, what is happening when you are having like a sexual dream? If every person in the dream is a part of me, but I'm dreaming of someone else and there's sex involved, what does that mean?
Well, I want to clarify that there are two different ways to interpret dreams. One way to interpret them is that everyone is a part of you. That way to interpret dreams is really focused on you and your internal life, how you are relating to yourself. Another way to interpret dreams is how your internal self is relating to the external world. In that kind of a dream, you might have people who you can name, people from your life who are showing up in that dream. And that could indicate that it's actually about them. If it's a sibling, a specific friend, a person that you might actually be attracted to, for example. So sometimes the dream indicates that it is that person. And I think maybe a differentiating factor here is, you know how sometimes you're in a dream, like you're in a place that maybe feels like your childhood home, but it's not, like there's something distorted about it.
Yep.
That can indicate that it's like just about you and your inner life because you've changed it a little bit. Your psyche has changed it. Sometimes that's our way of letting ourselves know that this is just about our inner life. Other times you might have a dream where you're specifically at the office. Like it looks exactly the same. It feels the same. That dream could really be about your work life, for example. In this example of having a sexual exchange with someone, which is a great question, I guess I would first ask, who is that person?
Yeah. What if you don't even know who they are? It's just, I don't know.
If you don't know who they are, to me, that would indicate that it's a part of you. Because your psyche hasn't, your unconscious hasn't bothered to tell you who that is. So what that would mean to me, ultimately, we know that sex is the energy of transformation. So what two parts of yourselves are wanting to transform, are wanting to merge together? So having a sexual fantasy about someone doesn't necessarily mean that you want to have sex with them. It can just mean, sometimes it does, but sometimes more often it just indicates that there's something to be transformed, right? Like if two people, you can speak to this, if you have two people, two charts, and someone has Pluto connecting to the other person's ascendant or Venus or whatever planet, that's bringing the sexual energy, but it's also bringing the energy of transformation.
Right. Yes.
So what is it that wants to shift? And then who are those figures in the dream?
Yeah.
You know, is one dominating the other in the sexual experience? Is it harmonious? Is it, you know, what are the feeling tones of the dream? Can also let you know, well, how do I really feel about transformation? And sex too can indicate, you know, there's a birth, death cycle that occurs. When you have an orgasm, that's known as like a mini death.
Yeah, the little death.
The little death. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you have a death, then there's a rebirth process.
Yep.
There's a completion of a cycle.
Very interesting. Deep thoughts. Yes. So, this transit, do you have the courage to go deep within yourself? Do you have the courage to be compassionate with yourself through what you discover within the depths of yourself? Because there may be something going on within you where you're like, I can't believe I had that thought. You might be ashamed of it. You might be blaming yourself for it. You might regret it. If so, do you have the courage to show yourself compassion? That's what this Mars, Neptune energy is about, which I feel like is a really nice transit to close out the week, because there is that intensity with the full moon, the beginning of the week, and Mercury retrograde ending. It's like people celebrate when Mercury retrograde's over, but it's still, it doesn't really let up until, a week or two after you start feeling normal. So this Mars conjunct Neptune will hopefully soften things up a little bit. And if you said something to somebody, you followed that impulse and you said something that you're like, God, why did I say that? That was so, oh my God. That this Mars conjunct Neptune will give you the courage to show yourself compassion And to also be empathetic to the person that you affected, where you can say, I forgive myself, but I'm also going to approach them and say, please forgive me for what I said. Or maybe you don't feel like you need to be forgiven. Maybe you just need to be good with yourself. Like, I understand that what I said affected that person in a negative way, or it hurt them. I didn't mean to, but I don't regret saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have the courage to have compassion for yourself? In spite of the guilt, the shame, the regret, the blame that you may be feeling or placing upon yourself.
Well, and it's beautifully said. And where is your compassion? If you have a hard time finding it, perhaps it's been repressed.
Mm-hmm. And that's what Mars has been doing as it's been transiting through Pisces, is trying to boil up what has been repressed and buried and bring it to the surface. And it might be uncomfortable when you see it, but that's where the courage comes in.
Yeah, the courage to see what's really been suppressed.
Yeah, because you're not suppressing it because you love it. You're suppressing it because you don't want to think about it.
The things that you're suppressing, we've said this many times before, they could be shameful, regretful, or they could be just traits that at some point maybe you associated with weakness, like compassion or like forgiveness, or, there can be a lot of reasons why we suppress things, situations, feelings.
Yes.
Often stemming from our parents, our authority figures. How did we experience them? If you had a parental figure who was really compassionate, but you associated that with weakness, then you might have suppressed your own relationship with compassion. Because you thought to yourself as a child, I don't want to be like that.
Right.
I saw that parent get taken advantage of.
That's interesting. Yeah, because Pisces is a sign that often gets taken advantage of. But Mars transiting through Pisces is giving you the courage to be compassionate, but also courageous.
Yeah,
through
to
that
associate
compassion.
the two together.
The compassion is courageous.
Right.
I'm not being taken advantage of by being compassionate to somebody.
It's compassion as a strength. Right.
Okay. Awesome. Should we do some questions?
Let's do it.
Before we get going with questions, I just wanted to remind you that if you are enjoying the content that Gabriella and I are creating here with the weekly transit, please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Rate us 5 stars on whatever listening platform you are listening to us. Write us a positive review. And if you would like to support us monetarily, you can do that via Spotify as a monthly donation to the podcast. There's 3 different values that you can choose to support the podcast financially. But we thank you for your support.
We do. Thank you very much. Our first question comes from Natalie. Hi, I'm an Aries Sun, Libra Moon, and Capricorn Rising, born just before another lunar eclipse in Libra in 1996. With my Mars, Sun, South Node, and Mercury all in Aries, will I survive the retrograde and eclipse?
I hope so, Natalie. Hopefully you're listening and you have survived, because of course we're already past that point. Sorry that we're just getting to your question now. We've got a lot of questions to do, but yes, I imagine that, going through that, it might have been very intense. As an Aries Sun, Libra Moon, Capricorn Rising, that's all cardinal signs, which are, being hit by the lunar eclipse in Libra, and then potentially the solar eclipse in Aries. So, in order to survive, which I assume and hope that you have, let us know how you're doing, how that was for you. But for you, I imagine that these eclipses were about finding that balance between who you are and how much you're giving to others. There's a real tension there between that Aries Sun and Libra Moon, because you strongly identify with yourself, but you're emotionally fulfilled by being in relationship with others. But my hope for you during this whole retrograde and the eclipses is that you've been able to, like we were talking about earlier on the podcast, have been able to define who you are. And through that defining of self, you are clear about the type of people that you want to attract into your life and be in relationship with. So I hope that's helpful to you, Natalie.
Beautifully said.
Thank you. Let us know.
Yeah, please. And that goes for anyone who's asked a question. If you have anything more to share, feel free to.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd love to know
yeah.
how these responses land for you. So
it's always nice to get a message on Instagram or on Spotify where somebody's like, "Oh, thank you so much for answering the question. Yeah, they hit the mark," or whatever. Like, we like to know that what we're sharing in terms of your questions is helpful. So yes, we're here to help.
Our last question comes from Black Cap Bakery. I have 3 stelliums in my chart: Sagittarius Sun, Ascendant, and Mercury, a Scorpio Moon, Venus and Pluto, and Capricorn Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. What is the best way to find balance between those 3 energies, and what should I be cautious of?
Awesome. Yeah, love it. 3 stelliums, very powerful, very intense. Sagittarius Sun, Ascendant, Mercury, truth teller, freedom lover, philosopher, channeler of spirituality and energy from the heavens coming through you. Very wise individual, I imagine. Scorpio Moon, Venus, Pluto, very intense emotions and intense in relationships and how you connect to others, how you bond with others. Capricorn, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus. Saturn is the planetary ruler of Capricorn, just as Pluto is the planetary ruler of Scorpio. So 2 of those planets are in their ruling signs. Saturn in Capricorn, that is, you're a worker. You're not afraid of hard work. You're willing to do the work required to get to where you want to go, to achieve what you want to achieve. But Neptune in Capricorn means that you're going to, throughout life, lose faith in terms of your relationship to the authority, your relationship to the authority, your relationship to yourself as the authority. So you need to reimagine the dream as yourself as the authority. And then Uranus in Capricorn, you have a sense of rebellion when it comes to authority. But the way that you work with that is by being independent in your authority. You need to be a boss in some way, somebody who is working towards something that is worth your time, that gives you the freedom to do what you want, when you want, how you want, and that supports you in bonding and merging power with others. So the way to find that's really how you find the balance. The balance, Sagittarius, is freedom. Capricorn's very controlling, which would seem antithetical to the freedom energy of Sagittarius, but really the Capricorn energy is giving you the strength, the will to find and create work that supports your sense of freedom.
To put some structure to it.
Now, the Scorpio energy also antithetical to Sagittarius, because Scorpio is somewhat controlling in a different way. It's very clingy in terms of relationships, especially Scorpio Venus is somebody who is going to be deeply bonded to others, but yet you still want that freedom. So how do you maintain that sense of freedom when you are so bonded to someone else. And the way that to do that is to find yourself in a relationship with somebody who really supports your freedom, where you feel that you can be vulnerable with someone else, bonded to them, because through that bond, they support and encourage your sense of freedom, and they adhere to your sense of authority, the Capricorn energy. So I think the thing that to be cautious of would be Sagittarius can be really wild. So you want to...
There can be an experience of excess too, right?
Yes. So you want to be... The challenge is going to be in discernment over who you're bonding with. Because that Sagittarius energy can be very, like you said, excessive. And you might just bond with somebody in sort of a fling that becomes more serious, and then you feel stuck with the person. Yeah, I think that's the biggest sort of area to be cautious of. Yes.
Yeah. I'm also wondering the importance of being cautious to not use freedom as a tool to manipulate.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think with these Scorpio placements in particular, there can be a tendency to be able to see how to manipulate situations if you wanted to. You know, you have access to kind of the behind the scenes way that people operate. So
right.
You'll be able to
that
see
psychic ability. So you
can see how to manipulate situations for your own benefit. And you could be using your Sagittarius energy to sort of meet the Scorpio need in a way that sort of ends up creating internal conflict. And so I'm wondering if that Capricorn piece is there to sort of like monitor those two, like monitor the kids on the playground.
Right. Yes, but the Capricorn piece could also end up being on the shadow side, using that Scorpio manipulation to also control other people.
Sure.
And to be very rigid. It's like, I want my freedom, but you can't have yours. So that's definitely something to look out for, I think.
Very true. Yeah, I guess what I would be cautious of is not completely identifying with any one of these stelliums, allowing yourself to see them all as kind of equal parts of yourself. Like, you know, thinking of an image of a triangle, like give them all their space and their value. And to the best of your ability, respect each of these parts instead of kind of letting one of them run the show.
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Black Cap Bakery is a very powerful individual. Someone that has 3 stelliums is very powerful, very intense. So I think it's important to, like you were saying, just find the balance between the 3 in terms of your appreciation of self, working with the lighter side of the energy. It's not just about your freedom, it's about the freedom of others. It's also about being discerning about who you're bonding with, and it's about being responsible in terms of the power and control that you have over others through all that Capricorn energy. That as the authority, it's not to take advantage of other people. It's to be in that higher frequency that I'm in authority, so my job is to help those that are beneath me. If you're in a position of power, then you need to
not abuse the power.
Exactly.
Ultimately.
Yes.
Right.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you, Scott.
Until next week. Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any others may be affecting you, or if you are interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. If you're interested in delving into the world of psychotherapy with Gabriella, you can connect with her at innervisionpsychotherapy.com. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog-Lyman. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian, wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.